Hello, Pawn Stars, and welcome to the Rathole. This is your host, Commissioner Zack Eichten, along with my esteemed colleague, guest, and friend, team owner of the Lock Flopstas, John Stevens.
Yes. As the name indicates, I am at an all-time low right now after losing my fourth straight game after winning the first two.
Are you considering changing your last name to Bellion?
No, I'm not. Should I be?
It's an all-time low.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe. I could be the John Bellions.
I was talking about like your last name, but
No, I would never change my last name in real life. But I could change my team last name to be the Lock Bellions.
Has a real
the flop,
interesting ring.
The Flop Tellions.
That's it.
The John Flop Tellions.
No, I like the flop Tellion.
The flip flop Tellions.
I think you nailed it. Got it in one.
Yep,
it was great. Yeah, definitely a tough week for you, John. Just some bad luck on your part for sure. Although I think you ended up having the third lowest score on the week. So
yeah, it was another relatively high scoring week for the league in general. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right about that actually. So I can't complain too much. It wasn't like my matchup was unbeatable or anything this week. I just didn't do enough. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely been tough for you. As of right now, I think you're pretty low right now on percentage of max points achieved.
I'd be shocked if I wasn't the lowest at this point.
You are the lowest at 81.89% of your max points achieved. Luke is still somehow in first place on that with 90.25% of his max possible points achieved to this season so far.
I will say the one bright spot for the Lock Flop Tellions is that I did actually move into the playoff picture. I'm now in the playoffs, even though I lost. I went up a spot in the rankings this week.
Yes.
So,
congrats
maybe
to
not
you on that. But let's get into how we got there. And we can start with your matchup here, John. You versus Jack's on, Jack's off. 120.4 falling to Josh 127.18. Despite some sort of poor performances here from folks like Lamar Jackson and Scary Terry.
Yeah, I can't believe that Noah Fant had, I don't know. I looked away for 1 second and Noah Fant had like 7 points in the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden I open it back up and I see that Josh is suddenly projected like 99% to win. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yep.
And then evidently Noah Fant must have got like a big touchdown or something because all of a sudden he has 20 points. So between Fant and Cup, that was pretty much like half of his team's production. I mean, The rest of his team did not really play to win, to be frank.
Yeah, and to be frank, you'd have to change your name. Yeah, but I mean, Josh is in here playing both running backs from Dallas. That was the type of lineup he's starting. But John, I just really want to get your take. Obviously, Kareem Hunt going to the IR. That's tough right after Nick Chubb was out. He's going to be out again this week. I really want to get your take, though, on Mike Williams. And what are you going to do with Prison Mike here?
Well, I unfortunately don't really have an option in terms of what I will be doing with him next week because he is on bye.
That's nice.
I'm really hoping that he collects himself over the bye and plays better because if I sit him on my bench again, he will for sure go off for 20 plus points.
Guaranteed.
I know that. So my only chances at this point is for him to just put up like maybe 10 points when I play him, or maybe I just have to trade him. It could just be like a scheme thing. He doesn't really fit in well with the Rock Flopstas. The Rock Flop Tellions. The Rock Flop Tellions. Yep. So I don't know. I am beyond disappointed with Mike Williams at this point in 2 of the weeks, and I'm beyond disappointed in my decision to not play him in the 1 week that he went off, and I would have won that matchup if I started him. So
that's always tough. I did want to get your take on one more player on your team here, Darren Waller. Darren Waller has been, a consistent player here, currently tight end 4 in PPR rankings, but Has only broken into double digits twice over his 6 weeks this year. What's your thoughts on your keeper?
Yeah, I'm not really disappointed in Darren Waller because he's doing what he can with the targets that he's getting.
Yep.
It's just for whatever reason, like in the first week, he had a crazy amount of targets. And then John Gruden, former ridiculed coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, disgraced at that time, said, "Oh yeah, no plan on changing. We're just going to keep targeting him." And then ever since then, they just haven't done that. So I don't know if Gruden maybe like showed the cards too early, and then teams are like, you know what, we should probably pay a little bit more attention to that guy, or what happened. But I don't know. I think it's going to come around for him eventually. I think it's a matter of time before the Raiders, realize what they're dealing with. I mean, people on the Raiders coaching staff have said that they believe he's a top 10 player in the NFL, period, regardless of position. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but you would think when you have a guy like that on your team that you're giving such high praise, you would want to get him, more involved in the offense. Yeah. So I'm not really sure what's going on in Las Vegas with Darren Waller.
Yeah, definitely tough to see there. But let's move on to our next game here, which is the Gluten Freaks versus the Dog Sniffers. Freaks taking the win, moving Zack to 8-3 all time against Thomas. Thomas and I have still never met in playoffs. Remember that from last week, but much like Aaron Rodgers might say about the Packers, I own you.
Wait,
Thomas, wait.
He owns the Bears.
Yeah.
You said he owns the Packers.
Well, he owns them too.
Well, he may be a minority stakeholder like many other Wisconsinites that own stock in the Packers.
Yeah. Well, he owns somebody. And
he tried to own the Packers this offseason, and it turns out that he is actually still owned.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But much like the Bears, to Aaron Rodgers, get owned. Great game from the Josh Allen, number one quarterback, played this week. Kind of a low score for the number one quarterback, to be honest. But
it's actually the number two quarterback, excuse you, behind Patrick Mahomes, which doesn't seem possible, but he is.
I was talking about this week, like the highest.
Oh, I thought you were talking about overall. Well, you can't just say number one quarterback.
I said this week.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Okay, fair enough.
I'll cut that.
No, you don't need to cut that. I can own my mistake. I'm sorry. Yeah, Josh Allen played well for you, though.
He played fine. I was obviously disappointed in my boy, Austin Eckler. That tough performance there against Baltimore. But when you go down that quickly, nothing you can really do for your running back there. And, the rest of the team, they did fine. I was disappointed in my flex play. Should have played, Daryl Williams, or Marvin Jones or JD McKissick.
Any of them.
But Emmanuel Sanders did fine. And Thomas's team here, I don't really know what to think about Thomas's team at this point.
I mean, well, one last thing to say about your team. I thought it was good to see Cook come back and basically pick up right where he left off, and basically left where Madison left off. But then jumping over to Thomas's team, one of two teams, maybe bonus fun fact, I cannot imagine that we've ever had two teams start two running backs from the same team in their lineup in the same week. And the funny thing is, if Nick Chubb played, I was very strongly considering doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We could have very easily seen three teams start two running backs from the same NFL franchise, which I think would be pretty crazy.
That'd be bananas.
I think even, like I said, even just two teams doing it has got to be a first for our league, and probably something that many other leagues have not tried before. So be interesting to see if that strategy sticks around for those teams. Kind of worked for Josh, didn't work so great for Thomas, but Thomas didn't, as we've noted throughout the entire season, Thomas just really doesn't have many options at running back. So he's really, scraping the bottom of the barrel for the guys that he can put into those spots.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have your Tom Brady, who finally had sort of a down game. And, the one bright spot on this team had to be Cole Beasley somehow, which that is not a great look for your starting lineup. And when Cole Beasley is really the only one leading the way, Mark Andrews had a great game for a tight end. I will say, good job, Mark Andrews. But Travis Kelce, still the number one. I guess I was kind of just expecting more out of this guy this year.
He hasn't been going crazy this year, but he's been putting up consistent production. I'm more impressed with, even though, he's tight end 2 on the season, I'm more impressed with Mark Andrews because I thought there was going to be 4 guys in front of him for that second spot going into the season. And he has shown back up as the very clear tight end 2 so far this season. And the only other final note I had on Thomas's team is I think it is really beginning to get very concerning with Keenan Allen, because Keenan Allen is a guy that relies heavily on volume. He's getting that volume, but he's not necessarily making a ton of catches. Maybe he should be making more catches, but I'm just really surprised. I really thought Keenan Allen would be like a top 5 wide receiver going into this season. Maybe not top 5, but for sure top 10. And he's not even in the top 20. So definitely a little bit of panic, I think, setting in probably for Thomas about a guy that was supposed to be like one of his 2 best players going into this season.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Thomas's team right now, and I'm a bit worried about the keeper ability of most of this squad. So probably gonna have to be making some moves to keep the season alive and get some keepers going here.
Yes.
Let's move over to our next matchup here. The Googled team names versus worse than trash. Sam are taking the loss. And I believe getting the lowest score on the week with his 101.56 performance to Tony's 125.54.
Yeah, for Sam or DJ Moore kind of came back to earth the last couple of weeks. I saw something on Twitter today that Carolina had the easiest schedule so far and has the hardest remaining schedule. So I don't think that bodes very well for DJ Moore, who was already starting to kind of trend back downwards from his really hot start. Kyler Murray continues to play very well, be an MVP candidate. And then the one really shocking one this week was Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, as they like to call him. If he can even put up half of that production, he will be probably one of the best picks from this year's draft, because
absolutely, this is by far the shining star on Sammer's team this year is Fournette, who has very obviously taken that number 1 role in Tampa Bay as the running back. It was a real timeshare with Rojo in the past. Keeper confirmed, Ronald Jones, but getting 22 carries, getting 6 targets and catching them all.
Yeah,
this guy really just did the work and has done the work over the last 3 weeks. And I'm definitely excited to see where he can go. That's Fitz. Fitz is also here co-hosting with us, everybody. So if you hear some whining, it is because he had picked Sam in his prop bet to go all the way to the playoffs this year. And so far with 2 and 4, that doesn't look like it will be happening.
I was really surprised to see that Sam didn't start either of his Vegas running backs going into this week. I think Drew had mentioned that he was curious if it was because they were playing Denver. And I was equally confused by that. I mean, either guy that he would have picked between Jacobs or Drake would have been an upgrade from his flex in a pretty big way. Probably not enough to make a difference in the matchup, but it was pretty surprising. So I'll be interested to see if Sam moves back to at least putting one of those guys in the starting lineup going forward again. Or maybe he'll be another team that starts 2 from the same team. So we'll have to see.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk about Tony's team. And I know this season in particular, the hosts on the Rathole have been very kind to Tony's team. And I want to continue that level of kindness here today. And
Tony's getting some kindness, but he is also getting a beating from me today.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a second. But from Tony's, this is by far Tony's best start through 6 weeks ever in.
And he's 3-3.
And he's 3-3. But his actual play here has been really, really good. He's only scored less than 114 points once. He hasn't scored below 100 this year. And through 6 weeks, this is the first time he's been averaging over 120 points.
Yep.
Definitely a great start for this rebuilding team. I think that Tony, this should be the first year, if Tony's able to keep up this level of production, very consistent, he should be able to make playoffs if he's able to keep it up.
Yeah, I mean, Tony has the consistency this year. His team is routinely putting up somewhere between like 110 to 125 points, which is like a really good range to be in. it does concern me a little bit that his team hasn't shown the ability to break through and get something more in like 140 or 150 range. So that's a little concerning to me, but that level of consistency is going to lead to him having maybe a slightly above average record, which should certainly get him in the playoffs. So I think Tony is on a good pace. He obviously struck gold with Najee Harris going into this season. He's been going absolutely crazy. You know, the youth strategy for Tony is certainly paying off. The one guy that has made an immediate negative impact on this team, though, was Mike Evans.
Yes.
And I cannot comprehend how Tony traded away Stephon Diggs for Mike Evans. I know we got some other pieces as well, but it truly baffles me. You just look at Stephon Diggs' numbers through the first 5 weeks. He was getting good production, not great, but good production, still room to go up. And they also only had one touchdown through the first 5 weeks. So it's like his production in my mind was only ever going to go up the rest of this season. I don't necessarily think he'll be maybe like a top 3 wide receiver like a lot of people thought he would be like going into the season, but I certainly think he will be in the top 10 wide receivers for sure. And I can't really say the same for Mike Evans. I know Mike Evans has had a pretty good start to the season, but splitting all those targets between himself, Antonio Brown, who looks really good, Chris Godwin, and then Gronk when he comes back in the red zone, I just think that Mike Evans is always bound to kind of be a boom or bust player. So I don't know. The move for me really didn't make sense for a guy that Tony was so difficult trying to trade for Diggs for the last year.
Yep.
And now he just let him go, you know, relatively easy in my opinion. So I was really, really surprised by that.
Yeah, that was, I think, you know, I made a move similar, getting rid of my top receiver that, you know, looking back.
Yeah, but you got Dalvin Cook.
Well, yes, I did. But Dean is better than Stephon. So, I mean,
they've been about the same this season. Maybe Dean's been slightly better, but Dalvin is not a slightly better player than Mike Evans.
That is, well, okay, that's true. I will just say that I'm very pro Tony this year. I think he's got the pieces in place to actually make playoffs for the first time in his Pong Stars career. And I'm just really excited to see where this kid can go as we move on. But let's go over to our next matchup here, which is our highest scoring matchup of close to our highest scoring of the Gruesome Grinders versus the Imposters, with Drew taking a commanding victory after what appeared to be a toss-up for a lot of the night.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Lucas jinxed himself very hard.
So bad.
I hope he learns from that mistake. He says that it was like a higher level play because he locked Drew to win. I don't believe it. I mean, obviously the Rocco Memorial Trophy is important, but it's not nearly as important as the championship trophy. So I think that was him kind of hiding his sadness for jinxing himself. But on the other side of things, Drew might think this is a jinx, but I'm just going to come out and say it. If anybody gave me right now Drew versus the field to win the regular season title, I would take Drew 100% of the time.
Really?
Drew's team is, in my opinion, so much better than any other team in the league. He really, outside of Antonio Gibson, doesn't have too much injury trouble. Like in the current moment, Derrick Henry has just been unstoppable this season, and also just getting 30 carries a game and not showing any sign of injury or anything. Like Nick Chubb got 20 carries a game for a few games, injured. And every other running back that gets, Christian McCaffrey, any other running back recently that has gotten that kind of workload has just immediately had some sort of nagging injury. So to see Derrick Henry just continue to put up the type of production that he has, it's truly amazing that he's able to withstand that. But if he is, which we should have no reason to believe he isn't, Drew, I think, is going to just stroll to the regular season title this year.
Yeah. It's been absolutely crazy to watch as this has happened. I mean, just for comparison on Derrick Henry, just the absolute dominance. Derrick Henry, by far the number one running back this year, currently has 162.1 fantasy points this year. Austin Eckler, RB2, has 115.
Yeah,
it's outrageous.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And then the field gets a lot closer. Zeke is number 3 this year, which good for him. But it is legitimately frightening going up against Derrick Henry.
10 touchdowns already. Something that surprised me a little bit is he's like ever so slightly a little bit more involved in the pass game, it seems like. So, I mean, if he keeps up his pace with receptions and targets this season, I think he would surpass his numbers in previous seasons, most recent seasons for sure. So Derrick Henry's just looking like a total unstoppable force. You know, he's still got the Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill duo who, you know, Tyreek's been very boom or bust. And then Patrick Mahomes hasn't played very great, but he's still the number 1 fantasy quarterback. Yep. And then he just picked up Stephon Diggs. So
for Mike Evans.
So yeah, I don't know. I just don't really see. I really don't see Drew's team slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, and the number 1 sort of, you know, fun spot I think on this team right now is Antonio Brown. Just like having this guy who has put up, you know, just around 20 points 3 of the last 6 weeks is, you know, that's a fun player to have on your team. I mean, it's a very boom or bust team. I think Hill, Diggs, and Antonio Brown all have boom or bust. And then for some players, it's just boom. The only part of this team right now where I'm a little bit worried is that RB2 spot if Gibson has a nagging injury that keeps him out for a few weeks. But given the rest of this team, not too worried. Lucas's team, on the other hand,
I might have to say the F word about Lucas's team.
Do it.
I'm calling Lucas out. He's a bunch of frauds. I'm not buying the Lucas hype. His team has been simultaneously unlucky and lucky this season. He's had some injuries to deal with, but it seems like every player that he's picked up and put into his lineup has either been very good or at least giving him the production that he needs. Adam Thielen concerns me. In the 2 weeks that Adam Thielen hasn't had a touchdown, he only had 5 and 6 points. I know that Adam Thielen has gotten a lot of touchdowns throughout his career, but I think I've said it before. You just have to think that at some point he's not going to get touchdowns on a weekly basis, and that will drastically hurt his production because Jefferson's getting way more targets. So I don't know. I was never super big on Lucas's team, and it's just very surprising to see how many things have worked out for him in his favor in terms of the players he's picking up.
Yep.
I'll just be curious to see if, you know, the Daryl Pattersons of the world will be able to continue their dominance or if they're a little bit more of a fluke.
Yeah, just the one piece of this team that I still just really love, Daryl Henderson. Mm-hmm. I will say props to Lucas for having the foresight to get him on your team and have him sit down as a keeper prior to the Kakers injury. I mean, he's missed 1 week this year. He missed week 3 with an injury, but every other week he's been at 14 points or above, and he's got a pretty nice schedule over the next couple of weeks with Detroit and Houston coming up. He gets to play Jacksonville later, and then, you know, I'm really excited about this guy. I think that he is going to be a piece. I
mean, if you were to tell me that 2 of Lucas's running backs were in the top 10 for running backs this season, and neither one was Saquon Barkley, I would have slapped you in the face. There's just no way on earth that I would have thought that was possible. But both Henderson and Daryl are both, I believe, in the top 10, which is really just crazy considering neither of those guys were really even a thought for a keeper until the, you know, Kakers injury. And then obviously the, you know, mega brain move from Lucas to pick up Daryl. So
yeah, definitely a mega brain move there. Unfortunately couldn't quite get the dub. You know, that's what happens when you run into Derrick Henry
and jinx yourself
so bad, like incredibly bad. But that's the way cookie crumbles. Lucas 4-2. I believe that's more wins than he got last year.
Total. Yeah, it is. He's surpassed its win total from last season.
So congrats to Lucas on that. Yeah, he had 4 total wins, I guess, if we include postseason, to give Thomas the the Plop Award. So
the Plop Award.
But that is that. So we'll see how this shakes out. Finally, our game of the week, which I was criticized for picking on this program by my co-host last week.
Oh yeah, I like to criticize you on your game of the week picks as well.
Yeah, but this
just
is
because you go more on historical matchup, I feel. Whereas
absolutely.
I'm kind of thinking the game of the week should be like the most pertinent matchup in the week for this season, but you're always going back to the history, which I do love, especially when there's, hardware on the line like there was this week.
Yep. And the hardware, of course, was Brennan Swan snagging that big man trophy. It's the big boy trophy from Randy's Donuts with a decisive 146.8 to 120.7 victory, led by his receiving core here pretty much of CeeDee Lamb, Dean, and Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see Brennan's team go off this week. Damian Harris also had a pretty good week. Yep. So that's a bright spot for the spring chickens. Although overall, I'm still feeling very down on Brennan's running back specifically, especially after he traded away Cook and Carson is still on IR. So until Carson comes back, his running back situation is going to be pretty shaky. But if his receivers keep putting up the numbers like they did this week and Dak Prescott keeps playing like an MVP candidate, he should still be able to get some wins. So we'll see.
Yeah, I definitely am I kind of, quite frankly, shocked at how that game turned out here with Brennan taking the victory. I will say I want to criticize Noel a little bit in some of his decisions here. As we've talked about on this program before, revenge games against the former
Jalen
team
Waddle
is so critical that you're playing those guys. Jalen Waddle on the bench for 24 points and Damian Harris in the lineup and did a great job as that running back centerpiece for Brennan. Definitely questionable decision there from Noel, but of course he wasn't helped out by the likes of Herbie only getting 11 points in their whooping against Baltimore. Kadarius Toney leaving in the first quarter. These are just the types of things that they're definitely hard to overcome. Here.
Jonathan Taylor looking actually surprisingly good. Started the season a bit slow, but in his last 3 weeks, he's averaging like 25 or so points, which is like almost on par with Derrick Henry and like Najee Harris.
Yep.
So he probably is like the running back 3 after, week 4 or something, but he has been pretty surprising to me. Obviously the news a couple of weeks ago that Indianapolis was looking to trade Marlon Mack is also beneficial.
Yes.
And, Jonathan Taylor's also had weeks where he's had 3, 4, or 5 targets. So that wasn't something that, people were kind of expecting him to get like Derrick Henry like targets going into this season. And it seems like he's at least somewhat involved in the passing game, which helps set the floor for running backs. So definitely kind of the lone bright spot for this team right now.
Yeah, I definitely, a little bit of caution there. He was playing against Houston.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. But
30 against Baltimore in the previous week.
Yeah, when Austin Eckler is only getting 7.5 in the same against the same defense there. So definitely interesting to watch how this moves forward. I think Noel has the pieces more than we thought he did to potentially get further into the season than we thought. I think he has a playoff contending team. Especially just like looking at our standings here when we have 5 teams that are 2 and 4. It's still anybody's game at this point for getting in there.
I still feel very positively about Noel's team, and I think he is a playoff team. At this point, it's just a matter of it's getting to the point now where his team and many other teams just have to win games.
Yep.
So, this one, for example, something like this happens again where he scores 120 points and doesn't win, it's just going to start hurting more and more. So I guess at a certain point, all you can do is put up the points that your team can, but you kind of just have to hope that the matchups fall your way when you're, only 2 and 4 through 6 weeks. You got some ground to make up.
Definitely some ground to make up there. But speaking of, things we got to do, we got to get over to the fun fact of the week. So this week's fun fact of the week here, we're going to be talking about just the absolute volatility of our teams here this week. John, just without looking, who do you think is the most consistent team this year?
Well, based on our discussion earlier, and since I already said it, well, I'm going to say it's either Tony or Drew. I'll say Tony because we talked about it earlier, but I think Drew could also be in that conversation.
Yeah, and you are correct. It is Tony. So actually, fun fact, little bonus here is standard deviation is now in the database
statistics
for folks to be able to go take a look at how far off the mean your team typically is. Just a quick check on volatility. Tony, you are correct, is the lowest deviated team here with just a very consistent team, averaging, like I said earlier, 120.56 points per week. And he's only deviating off that 8.47 points per week.
Wow.
Extremely consistent team. And it's been very fun to watch. I come in second actually with 8.91 points off my mean of 119.79. Who do you think is the most volatile team, John?
I would say probably the Spring Chickens.
You would be correct. Brennan and the Spring Chickens are averaging 112.65 points per week. However, 4 of the 6 weeks have been 101.48 or less. So it definitely some very high scores, bringing that average up in standard deviation of 26.55 points. So, 27 points almost swing from week to week off the mean.
Yeah, what a shock. I think we've perfectly diagnosed it the entire season that Brennan's just a boomer bust team. It's always been the MO, and now we have stats to back it up. Real science and math.
Yes, I do love stats. And just I'll go down the list here really quick. Noel is second most volatile. We're going to go from most volatile to second or to least volatile. Noel comes in second. Then we have Lucas coming in third. Then we have some pretty close ones here of Thomas and Drew coming in at fourth and fifth here. In sixth, it gets a lot lower as we start here. John comes in sixth. Josh is in seventh. Eighth coming in at Sam, and then of course Zack and Tony at 9 and 10.
Interesting. Sam is consistently bad.
Sam has the lowest average points for week to week, but he is a lot closer to towards that average week to week than somebody like the Spring Chickens is. So interesting to see. We'll see how this progresses. Obviously, of course, anybody can always check out these statistics, such as the standard deviation, percentage of max points achieved, your points against who you play, your historic rivalries, all that jazz, in the Pong Stars database located on the website. So feel free to check that out.
It's free. Bonus fun fact. This is only relevant to Zack and I, but I started the season 2-0 and have since gone 0-4. Zack started the season 0-2 and has since gone 4-0.
That is a fun fact.
It's not a very fun fact for me, but it's all I can think about lately because I think Zack and I's teams are kind of on a similar level. And I'm just like, man, I wish I was Zack right now. I wish I started 0-2 so I could be 4-2 right now.
Yeah, there's some, ranking teams this year has actually been really tough. I will say, I think that this year especially has had some interesting teams having better scores than anticipated, and some teams who should be scoring higher just not getting wins.
Yeah, I think like the two that stick out to me are obviously Noel and myself, widely regarded as two of the top, 3 or 4 teams going into the season, and are both 2-4.
Yep.
And then you got Lucas's team, widely regarded, one of the weaker teams, but is 4-2. Almost 5-1 if he didn't jinx himself. So, I mean, it is definitely. And then Tony's team is playing well, but 3-3. But it's definitely been challenging, kind of our understanding of this league dynamic historically, as we've had a little bit, like you said, some teams creeping up and some teams that are usually at the top creeping down. So
yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting to see. All right, it is time to go over to one of my new favorite segments, and that is bets that nobody really cares about.
yes, the best of segments.
And we're here. Glad we all made it. Thanks for joining, everybody. It is a joy, a pleasure, an honor to be presenting this segment here. I'm really excited for my prediction that nobody really cares about. This week it's brought to you by the Miami Dolphins and their continued disappointment for me, especially in my boy who's been done so dirty, kilometers Gaskin. And the bet that I don't think anybody really cares about is that kilometers Gaskin will finish outside of the top 40 running backs this season.
Wow. I don't know. I think that's borderline something somebody could care about, specifically the Myles Gaskin owner, but
well, it's not me, so
that's true.
So I don't really care.
But yeah, Myles Gaskin, obviously not the player that a lot of people were hoping he would be this season, so somewhat irrelevant. But yeah, good one.
Yeah. All right. You are up next.
All right. Mine, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I am very interested lately in the players that have two positions.
Ooh.
I think they can potentially be a weapon. You can start them in either wide receiver or running back, or obviously flex. Another one is Juwan Johnson, who's actually a tight end / wide receiver. I think this might be someone to add on Thomas's team, kind of a backdoor way to get himself a third tight end on the roster.
That'd be fun.
And my prediction, and probably why Thomas should pick him up, is that in week 10 against the Titans, he will have 2 touchdowns.
Ooh.
A very specific prediction.
That is a very specific
but
prediction.
I just feel it. I think maybe he'll be motivated by going up against the god Derrick Henry in that game. And so Thomas, if you're listening, if you have buy trouble or injury trouble in that week, would highly suggest picking up Juwan, starting him as your third tight end in the wide receiver slot, fulfilling a lifelong dream and also getting, 2 touchdowns out of it. So.
Yeah. Thomas, the tight end, strong. Let's see if he is able to pick him up and do it.
If Thomas does do that, I will lock him as my pick in the pick 'em that week. Bonus.
High stakes. That's high stakes.
Bonus stakes.
That is bonus stakes.
And all right. Not ribeyes.
Okay. All right. That is all we have for bets that nobody really cares about.
I might have made mine too exciting. People might care about it now.
Yeah, I kind of do care about it now. But let's see here. Let's get on over to our week 7 predictions and matchups here. Boy, this one is going to be a struggle. I think this week is probably the worst week of fantasy football. Projections and buys and players being on bye, plus injuries that I have ever seen playing fantasy football.
For my team specifically, I honestly might not be able to field the roster between my injuries and buys. I'm going to have to drop a guy potentially like Kenny Golladay in order to pick someone up to just fill a spot.
Yep.
So yeah, this week is crazy. I think there's like 6 teams on bye. Obviously there's just been tons of injuries in the last couple of weeks. It's really going to be a struggle, I think, for everyone. I don't think we're going to have the production that we've seen like the last 2 weeks out of this league. It's going to be probably one of our lowest scoring in history weeks, if I had to make a guess.
Yeah, that is my guess too. We have some absolute powerhouses out this week. We have the Bills, the Cowboys, the Jaguars have been putting up enough fantasy numbers. They've had some good fantasy players. The Vikes, Steelers, and the Chargers.
Yeah.
Just speaking from my team off the bat, I'm missing my keeper level quarterback, both my starting running backs, and my tight end, who's been like tight end 4 on the year.
Yeah.
Of Dalton Schultz. And that's just the start of it. And then you got other people on by like Marvin Jones. It's a tough go of it.
I was even struggling to like find people I could potentially just do a quick trade with, because other teams also just have no one to start. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what happens. When you guys are listening to this, obviously all the waivers will have gone through.
Yeah.
Very curious to see what that waiver wire looks like this week, because pretty sure everybody's going to need to be picking up one guy.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of claims this week for sure, but it's definitely going to be tough. Let's start off here with the Gluten Freaks versus Randy's Donuts, because we already started. Yeah, as I mentioned, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Josh Allen, Dalton Schultz, all on bye.
Yeah,
and
this is a tough one for you.
Marvin Jones on bye. Emmanuel Sanders is on bye. This week is, once I get through this week, I feel like I'm never losing, because all my guys are on bye. It's going to be crazy.
It's a good strategy to just say, you know what, this one week I'm just accepting that I'm going to lose, and then the rest of the weeks you never have more than like one guy on bye.
Yeah,
but it really sucks in that 1 week.
It's going to really suck. And honestly, I'll say this publicly. There are a few teams in this league that I like winning against more than the others. For instance, Randy's Donuts, for an example. Winning against Noel just is a really fun activity. You're one of the teams that I really like winning against.
I will say that I think there could potentially be a future trophy for this matchup, and I think I would call it the MC Boo Award. Because both of these teams very big, owners are very big MCU fans. Until I met Noel, I didn't think there would ever be a bigger MCU fan than Zack. So
Same.
I think that maybe that's a point of contention between these two great friends otherwise. So could be a good rivalry going forward.
Absolutely. I think that Noel and I definitely have a rivalry. I will say that Noel has historically owned me in the rivalry. I'm only 1-4 against Noel, and the first game and the only game I've ever beat Noel was 2018, when Noel put up one of his lowest scores of all time of 51.8 in 2018.
In week one.
In week 1 of 2018, when the Tigan Doofuses just got obliterated.
Is that when that was when the Tigan Doofuses were born, was that season?
Yes, that was the Tigan
After like
Doofuses.
The first 2 weeks, he just it terrible.
Yeah, exactly. That has been the only time I have been able to beat Noel in fantasy football.
Yeah.
I'm still riding that high. So definitely something to keep in mind here. Yeah. But for my team this week, to my credit, I will say, I think I have startable players for most of my positions here. JD McKissick, assuming that Giblett is taking a week off to deal with an injury.
Helpful.
Great helpful play. Who is this? Daryl Williams.
Daryl Williams
played great.
Yeah.
And we'll have to see how it works out against Tennessee. But definitely startable with Clyde out. Bob Trees is there. Brandon Cooks is available. And then Julio, well, we'll have to see. Might be starting someone else in that flex position. But we'll have to see how that
Bones
goes.
Jones. I think his injury was not even bone related.
It's hamstring.
Old Muscles Jones.
Yeah.
Is a hamstring a muscle? I think it is.
I
right?
think it is.
Or
and there's no way of knowing.
Maybe? I don't know. Science.
Brennan, if Brennan was ever listening to the show, he'd be screaming into the car right now. He doesn't listen though.
Yeah. I like like I said, I like Williams on your team this week. He's definitely the guy I'll be watching. On the Randy's Donuts, I'm watching Joe Mixon. He's put up some good production in the last couple of weeks. I think, although Joe Mixon, I don't think has been on Zack's team in this league ever, or was very long ago. I view this as a bit of a revenge game. You know, yourself, you are one of the biggest shit talkers of Joe Mixon with myself.
Yep.
In this league. So I think Joe Mixon may have a little bit of extra motivation, you know, going up against the gluten freaks. And even though you are able to at least field a decent roster this week, I just think Noel's roster is a little bit better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Going into this week. So I'm definitely favoring Noel.
As am I. This is, I think, going to be the first week of the season that I'm not picking myself and pick them.
Which means you will certainly win.
Yes, it's a reverse jinx for sure. Noel, I know Noel is a huge jinx guy. So I'm trying to reverse jinx you, buddy.
Noel believes in jinxes as if they were scientific fact.
Oh yeah,
is what I've heard.
Everybody knows that. For sure. Let's see here. Our next matchup is going to be the gruesome grinders versus the dog sniffers. Yes. And you know, this is going to be an interesting one. I think that it is going to be very dependent to me on what Antonio Gibson is able to do for this Grinders team. If Gibson is able to play, advantage Grinders. If he's not, based off the rest of this roster's just buys and injuries, that's going to be a tough position to fill because Drew also has to fill a flex position this week as well.
And one of the guys that he could potentially be filling a spot with is Collins, but Collins may also be out. So Drew is definitely also going to be struggling to field the roster this week. Obviously, the guys that are in for him are still very good. So I think Drew will ultimately probably come home with the W. But Antonio Gibson, this is probably, you know, if buys and injuries weren't a thing, this is probably a week that you'd probably be wanting to sit Gibson anyway, just because even if he is playing, you got to think that his role is going to be dialed back to try to monitor that injury.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with my good friend Giblet. On Thomas's team, I'm watching that Arizona running back combo again, see if it didn't do terrible for him last week, but it definitely didn't help out. So I'll be interested to see if they can kind of take a little bit of a step up and see if that's actually a viable option for him long-term.
Yeah, that's definitely the question here. The fact that Ronald Jones is still rostered is absolutely outrageous to me.
I think that he might be 3 much sunk cost at this point.
I mean, that is certainly true.
Good nickname suggestion for you, Thomas.
But the player I'm watching here is going to be Allen Robinson, who is making a return to the starting lineup here. Has not scored double digits yet this season. Probably the biggest, if Rojo wasn't a keeper, probably the biggest bust of the keeper class. Well, no, Julio is also a keeper.
There have been worse, but Allen Robinson
and Ayuk was a keeper.
Is a tough one to swallow. It's an especially tough one to swallow for Thomas because he did trade for him from me.
Yeah.
Right before the season started. And obviously at this point, it's like, well, that was just not worth it. But I still believe in him. He's still a very good wide receiver. And you got to think as Jalen Hurts, probably continues to develop and get better. Justin Fields. As he continues to get better in the Bears uniform, Allen Robinson is eventually going to probably become his favorite target. So hopefully for Thomas's sake, it works out. But obviously at this point, Allen Robinson has been a huge disappointment.
Yeah. Just based off the teams here, I think that it's going to be a tough one for the Grinders, but they certainly have the ability to get the dub. Let's move on here to our joining our class of 2019 here of Tony Townsend and Worse Than Trash. Not a very good name for this year, I will say, to Jacks on, Jacks off, and Josh Palingo. Najee on bye, and also James Robinson and Ezekiel Elliott on bye. This is without the top backs that have been really propping these teams up. I'm interested to see how this one goes.
Yeah, I think both teams this week are going to have to get their production from the wide receiver spot, which both teams are not unfamiliar with doing. I mean, Josh obviously has Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 1 on the season, and then Tony has Justin Jefferson, who has done pretty much exactly what everybody expected him to do this year, played very well. And then Jamar Chase, who has been surprisingly probably the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if those wide receivers can make up the the missed points that are inevitably going to come from the running back position with both teams having, big losses to buy this week.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. Tyler Lockett remains benched currently in favor of Henry Ruggs with Justin Jefferson on bye. This could change prior to kickoff here, but Tyler Lockett has been obviously struggling since week 2. Hasn't scored above 8.5 points since week 2.
Shocker.
Who would have thought
Who
of
could have
that?
thought? Yeah,
Not me.
The other guy that I'm watching on Tony's team is his other receiver, Mike Evans, who he just traded for. Obviously, we talked about it earlier in the program, but Mike Evans theoretically should have a good game going up against the Chicago Bears defense, who is pretty good, but Tom Brady's been on one this season, and you just would expect that for Tony's sake, he's going to need Evans to go off every other week. So we'll see if it's this week, I guess.
Yeah. And then for Josh's team, Mike Davis has been just kind of a
stinker.
bust, just kind of a stinker this year, which is really disappointing. I was big on Mike Davis. I almost drafted Mike Davis.
I called that big time.
You did.
I did not call Daryl, but I did call Mike Davis not being good.
Yes, you did. I was big on him. I almost got him over Kilometers Gaskin. I didn't. Not good. So who would have, or Gus? Those were the 3 guys I was looking at. So none of them would have been good in that first round for me. But
I'm selfishly kind of watching Noah Fant this week because I'm just mad about what he did to me last week. So if he doesn't do it again this week, like if he just has like one catch, pulls up Bob Tonyan or something, I'll be very upset.
And I'll be excited to watch that.
But he is like a good tight end. So I do believe that wasn't like a super, crazy performance for him. Obviously, he was very good, but I don't think it's like, I don't think it would be as crazy as, Bob Tonyan getting a performance like that.
Yeah. For sure. Let's move over to our next one here of the Lock Flapstas over the Imposters. With I don't know how to go about this one, but the guy I'm watching on the Flapstas team is Jamal Williams at the running back 2 position currently.
Yeah. Stay tuned on that one, I guess. Obviously, he is not the guy that I want to be starting there. I just, being the fantasy football over-involved owner that I am, I like to set my lineup even before the waivers go through.
Yep.
So we'll see. I might pick up someone else that would come back in a spot. I do like Jamal Williams. Obviously, he had a terrible week last week, but
and playing against the Rams this week.
Yeah, and playing against the Rams, which I'm giving up on the sleeper color coding of matchups because the LA Rams are green somehow, which is just not correct. That is not a good matchup. But I don't know. This is a huge matchup, I think, for both teams. I think this is a big momentum game. I obviously need a win. Yeah. And I think that a loss here for Lucas could really start him kind of spiraling down. So yeah, I think this is potentially even a loser leaves town kind of matchup. I don't know if I'd be 100% comfortable saying that, but I think that the winner of this matchup will probably go to the playoffs over the other team.
I think that's a bold take here. So on Lucas's team here, obviously Glassbones has struck again here, but I'm just the player I am watching is going to be actually not this week, but what Lucas decides to do with his beloved Buffalo Bills defense, just going into the waivers on bye. Will he play the wire and try to get them back, or who else is going to get dropped on a team that has quite frankly been hit very hard by the injury bug? And can he afford to drop one of those injured players or his defense? I don't know, but that's just what I'm watching this week. If I'm not looking at scores, if I'm looking at scores, maybe Score Daryl RB1 comes back, but we'll see about that.
Got to be watching Score Daryl. Really bummed on my side that obviously Chubb and Hunter out, and Mike Thomas is not returning from IR. So just a flurry of bad, things, bad news to hit me all of a sudden. Probably a little bit of karma coming my way for calling out Lucas and Noel for always talking about their injuries. I just got slammed by it all of a sudden. So I don't know. It's a bummer, but
for sure.
It's gonna be a tough lineup for me to fill this week. There's gonna be at least one player that's projection is like probably 8 points. So it's not gonna be great.
Yeah. All right. Let's move over to our game of the week. Former roommates, the Spring Chickens versus the Google team names. And I think a very much loser goes home matchup. 2-4, both of them. One of them is moving to 2-5. The other one stays alive, sort of more in my brain a little bit for the season.
Yeah, if I was like 75% confident saying that about mine and Lucas's matchup, I'm like 100% about this one.
Yeah.
I don't think the team that loses this game can possibly make playoffs at this point. Both of them are 2-4, but compared to the other 2-4 teams in the league, maybe Thomas is kind of closer, but I think Noel and myself are kind of leagues ahead of both of these teams.
Yep.
So the winner of this matchup, I think, still is definitely not even a guarantee or in a great position to make playoffs. But I think the loser is certainly pretty much out of it at this point.
Yeah. And to Sam's credit, I think Sam is pretty much the only team in week 7 that is not just absolutely slammed with players on bye. Kyler, Fournette, Kamara, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Josh Jacobs. That's a great starting lineup. Not
even the players on his bench are on bye. He has full options.
Yeah.
I don't think Sam has his only player on bye this week is ETN, who is on IR. So he has everybody, everybody to pull from. And when you look at Brennan's team, it's pretty much the opposite. He's one of the teams that is hit hardest by this bye week. And obviously has some injuries as well, with Chris Carson. So you got to think the team names pull this one out, but I don't know. Brennan's team has that boom potential, and he could get hot and just get lucky with some of the players that he puts in. So you never know until it's over. But I'd definitely be favoring Sam this week.
Yeah, it absolutely is favoring Sam this week. Right now, RB2 here is Columbus Gaskin. We've talked about how disappointing the Miami situation is on this program, but also missing Dak Prescott. It's going to be a tough go of it here for the Spring Chickens. Hopefully, I know both these teams have already started, I think, thinking towards what a rebuild looks like. Trying to follow the steps of the esteemed Tony Townsend,
the king of rebuilds.
I think that this week is going to be the week that decides which one of them is going to be almost forced into that rebuild mode, even if they didn't want to.
I would warn against that strategy, though. I do not think that one is going to be one that's replicated again, where a team commits so heavily to the rebuild, but also avoids the punishment, and also nearly makes the playoffs last season.
Yeah.
So
I
still will never be able to understand how Tony pulled that off. So I would not implore either of those teams to do that.
Oh God. Oh no.
But
tanking in this league would be bad. Although I would love to see either of these guys back up on the stage.
I think once you do the stand up once, I don't think you can select that as the punishment again, in my opinion.
Ooh.
I know that's not an official rule.
I think that's a good rule. You're right. I would love to see Sam's calendar shoot. Speaking of Thomas, get your shit together.
If we don't get at least some proof that this calendar is in progress by next week, I think we need to have a little session of Commissioner Eichten pulling out the gavel and throwing down some justice on Thomas for not delivering on his not COVID relevant punishment that he has not done yet. So correct. I know we talked a big game about being very strict on the punishments, making sure it had to happen before the next season started. Obviously, that has not happened. We've heard that Thomas is working on it, but I think unless we see some proof, we're going to have something happen, because otherwise this is just going to be a thing every year. And the next thing we know, we're just not going to have a punishment. So,
and that ruins the vibe. So Thomas, get that in. But let's, wrap this baby up. Definitely going to be an interesting week 7. And we'll get back to hopefully some more high scoring games come week 8. But until then, we will catch you next time.